Hello, and welcome to Paranormal in Pennsylvania,
where we discuss history and hauntings.
Today's story takes us over to Eastern PA to discuss the first theater that we are discussing on the podcast. I'm Sarah.
And I'm Erica.
Let's get into it. So, this theater, it's called the Fulton Theater, and it's over in Eastern PA, and it's in Lancaster. Have you ever been?
Yes, I know that we've been to Lancaster because I feel like that's really close to Amish country, and I know that we've been there a couple times.
Yeah, it is Amish country.
Okay.
I used to have to drive through Lancaster to get to my parents' houses.
Oh, we really were so close.
I know, so close yet so far, like ships passing in the night. But I've never been to this theater, nor have I ever even heard of it. And, my family, we didn't really, go to Lancaster to do things unless it was the outlets. We more have passed through it, so I think that's why. But this theater has quite a bit of history. It was built on the site of a pre-Revolutionary War jail. So this takes us to 1763, specifically December 28th. And there was a gang called the Paxtang Boys that were going around and massacring the Conestoga Indians in the area. And the group of Native Americans was being held in the jail for their own protection from these Paxtang Boys.
Ah, okay.
So the whole tribe, or a good portion of the tribe, was in this jail. And what happened was the Paxtang Boys broke in and massacred everyone there.
Oh my gosh.
And the original exterior wall of the jail courtyard is actually the back wall of the current theater. So,
wow.
Yeah, the same structure dating back to 1763.
That's interesting. I'm surprised that it's held up after
me
all
too.
of these years. And also that's really interesting when you know the history of what happened there. You know?
And it actually stayed a jail for a while after that. And I think people were less politically correct back in 1763.
Right.
So in 1852, it was converted and it became like a hall to be used for community stuff. And the jail foundation was used as the base of the building for this hall. And it had things like community events would be there, fundraisers, etc. In 1873, so 21 years later, it became converted to the theater that it is today. And that's when the first ever play was put on there. But it's fluctuated in popularity over time a lot because when the first movies came out, the stage shows were less popular. And they actually ended up putting in a movie screen to try to save the building and keep it running.
Oh, all right. That's cool.
Yeah, and so it's oscillated between owners, between theater, movie theater, etc.
Right.
And in 1995, the building was completely restored and reopened as a theater, and it's been functioning as such ever since.
That's cool, though, to the fact that it fluctuated for so long and then the theater has become so popular again that it's officially a theater again without the movie screen is really interesting.
Yeah, and also that even though the history is, not the best, it still is a really old building. The fact that wall from the 1700s is still used, it really shows that this place has been a part of the community.
Right.
For a long time. So, once again, buildings with a lot of histories, especially histories including massacres, tend to lend themselves to tons of ghosts.
Yes.
So there are reports of people hearing ear-piercing screams from the murdered Conestogas that echo through the building. And people claim to see shadowy figures that could be Native Americans darting around the various floors.
The screams must be horrific.
I'm sure.
That's awful.
I'm sure. And the cool thing about this theater, and something we love about establishments, is that they lean into their hauntings. So there are actually profiles of 4 main ghosts on their website, or sorry, 3 ghosts on their website.
Ooh, okay.
So the first is called The Woman in White, and they think that her name is Marie Cahill or Cahill. And several actors have reported seeing a female ghost in a white dress at the bottom of a spiral staircase to the right of the stage. One person asked her what her name was, and she responded that it was Marie.
Gotcha.
So, given that, they went back and kind of researched, and Marie Cahill performed there many, many times, and she died right around the time that the theater started showing movies instead of having plays performed.
Well, that's interesting.
I know. It's so many reasons for her to, haunt this place.
Yes, yeah.
Not much is said about what she does other than appear. However, female performers specifically say that she screams at them when they sing on stage so that they can't hear themselves to hear if they're on pitch or not, and that it's because she was a bit of a diva in her time and doesn't want any competition.
See, now that's tough. As somebody who sort of sings, if I can't hear myself, all bets are off. Okay? If I'm like so off pitch, I can imagine how much that messes people up because it's really difficult to do that.
Not to mention being performing on stage and just hearing a scream.
Oh yeah.
In general.
Oh yeah. That would be crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, I would think it was somebody from the audience. I wouldn't even automatically go to a ghost. You know what I mean?
Right. Or something backstage.
True.
Even.
Yeah.
And she died in August 1933, and the first sighting of her was actually the next month. So she really has been haunting the building ever since she died.
Gotcha. That's kind of interesting. I wonder, now, was she like normally in a white dress? Is that the significance?
They didn't say,
Gotcha.
Actually. That's interesting. That's a good question.
Yeah, like I wonder if that was her like main costume. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So next up we have a ghost that's called the Whistler. And this story originates from a carpenter that was working, and he was working to repair the stage. He looked up to see a man in brown who was asking him for a cigarette. After stating the question, the man disappeared right before his eyes.
No. Every time.
I know you hate that
Every
trope.
time we hear a story about somebody disappearing, I'm like, no, thank you.
Yeah. So the carpenter was, understandably so, very scared.
Yes.
And he ran out of the theater and refused to return, completely ending his work on the project.
Understandable.
Yeah.
Fully valid.
I mean, because again, I feel like the trope of people disappearing or ghosts disappearing makes you question your own sanity.
Yes, you think maybe, okay, is my mind playing tricks on me? Am I going crazy? Like, what's happening? It's not. And then to get to the conclusion of like, I'm sane, but that was actually a ghost. I mean, that's not, no option there is good.
Right. Yeah. And like, what are people gonna think when you say?
True. There's a lot of naysayers out there.
There are. we know of that from people that like to comment on the podcast.
Literally the person I'm dating. So
So employees of the theater have confirmed that they've also seen this man, and that a strange whistling sound often accompanies him. It can also be heard without seeing him, specifically when someone messes up their line or misses a cue. So it's almost as if he's calling them out.
Gotcha.
There are also sounds of clapping associated with seeing him or hearing the whistling. And his identity isn't known, but people think that it must be an actor or a stage manager that used to work there.
Right.
Since he's like prompting people to get their cue or fix their line.
Gotcha. That's cool. That's interesting.
Yeah. The last ghost from the website is the ghost in the gallery. And the gallery houses the movie projector that was put in, and it has very limited access because of that. And it is still up there despite the fact that it functions for stage shows instead now. And one night, a worker noticed a man sitting in the benches of the gallery and went to ask him to move. The older man pointed to a young woman, and he said he was there to see his granddaughter perform. By the time the show ended, the man was gone, because the worker was like, okay, you can stay up here. And so the worker went up to ask the actress and tell her family that they couldn't be up there. And she said that both of her grandfathers were dead and that she always regretted that they never got to see her perform.
Oh no.
I know, so it's kind of like, that's a cute story.
Yes. It's nice to think that they may have gotten their chance, you know?
Mm-hmm. And again, a pretty benign ghost.
Right.
Just wants to see his granddaughter. But he's said to reappear anytime that actress was on stage.
Gotcha.
So that's what they advertise on their website. Now, this was also featured on the TV show Portals to Hell. And they were the first paranormal investigators to ever formally investigate this property.
Right.
And like most of these shows, they started by reviewing the history. So I'm going to add some of what they said on the show, but I didn't find in my research. So they added that the theater was part of the Underground Railroad and successfully helped at least 2 people escape.
That's so great.
I know, and it's really cool. I mean, you think of that area, it was probably pretty significant to get people up north across the Pennsylvania border.
Yeah, I always forget. I know that we're like still kind of far away, but we're like really close to places like Tennessee.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like Pennsylvania was probably like pretty important.
Right. So they also talked about the history wall specifically standing on stage, and one investigator is looking around to get their bearings of the area, and they look up to see someone standing and looking over the railing.
Ooh.
And remember, these people are coming in with minimal information. They're hearing the history in real time.
Right.
And the guy said that he heard the sound of whistling in his head when he looked up and saw this figure. So when he mentions that to the staff member taking him around, the staff tells him the story of the whistler and says that that's probably who he saw.
That's crazy.
I know. So then they move to an area that's currently being renovated at the time of filming, which is on the 4th floor. And this is where they housed patients during the Civil War. Because remember, this building has been around forever.
Right.
So one of the staff members tells a story of their experience there. And they were in the elevator and heard knocking seemingly on the elevator walls right beside themselves. And the sound followed them until they opened the door to this room and asked out loud if anyone was there. Once they asked, the knocking immediately stopped.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, so they were saying it almost seems like whatever the spirit was wanted her to open that door for them.
Right.
Like knocking on the door.
Oh my gosh.
I know.
I didn't even think about it in that context.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
So they set up cameras based on the history and what the staff members told them so that their night investigation could coincide with the most likely chance of seeing ghosts.
Right.
And they even brought in a medium to tour the place, and the medium didn't know where they were going ahead of time, so had no knowledge of the location at all. So upon entry, the medium says that he wants to go into the basement. And when he gets to the basement, he says he sees children, women, and men being rounded up and killed. He says that he can sense that they're hiding from something and crying, and that he also saw bars and that they might have been imprisoned. So, thinking back to the history, this sounds a lot like it could be the Conestogas.
Yes. Yeah. That's a terrible image.
I know, but
Like-
again, having no prior knowledge of the location, it's incredible that he could still pick up on that and see
Yes.
the ghosts. So he continues walking around the location, and he picks up on an interaction with 2 spirits. And they tell him that they were both slaves, and they show him jail cells. And he tells the staff member escorting him around this that he specifically saw jail cells. And so initially the staff member thinks that this is not slaves and goes back once again to the Conestogas.
Yeah.
But they think about it a little more, and the way that the 2 people that were enslaved got through to the theater through the Underground Railroad is that the local sheriff was working with them and left their jail cells unlocked so they could escape and run to the theater at night.
Oh.
So it's almost as if these spirits of people that were enslaved are showing him their story.
That's really just... I don't think there's the right word for it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like thinking about all of the things that these individuals had to endure is so hard because you just feel so terrible for their circumstances. But then being able to see these things in present day is actually very, like, I don't know, like, cool, interesting. Like, it's hard to put into like a word. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's interesting that he picks up on it, and also very sobering that these spirits are still there.
Yes.
With such negative stories or positive stories in the case of the people that were enslaved being freed.
Right.
So there are still more ghosts here. In the seats, the medium says that there is a ghost that likes to sit and watch the shows. Specifically, there is a woman in a white dress sitting there. And again, yeah, I know. Again, he has no knowledge. And so he talks to the ghost for a while, and he says that it's a woman named Marie who calls it her happy place, but she gets angry when other people are there and turn into stars.
Oh.
And
well, that tracks with everything we've heard so far.
Right, with her screaming, etc.
Yes.
And he says that he also sees her dancing and singing on stage as if she oscillates between being a guest and being the star of the show.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, I thought that was kind of cool.
Yeah.
So once the medium leaves, the investigators go around on their own, and they try this technique that I don't think we've ever discussed on the podcast. I hadn't heard of it. It's called fogging.
No, I don't think we have.
Yeah. So the technique is that they apply a bunch of fog from a fog machine and then apply lasers, and this is supposed to make it easier to identify any figures that might be present.
Okay.
Because the thought is with the fog, it can't be like as much of a shadow, and with the lasers, any distortion of the lasers can be easily seen.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's really cool technology.
Yeah. So they do this on the stage to try to see Marie. And early on, one investigator sees a black figure rising from the front stage. And they continue to try to appeal specifically to Marie by calling her name, playing music she liked, etc.
Right.
And every time that they call her name, they hear metal banging backstage.
Ooh.
But they never actually see a figure other than that one rising from the front row.
Okay.
So then they move back up to the 4th floor that used to be the Civil War Hospital, since that's where one of the other staff members had an interaction. And on the walk there, one of the investigators says that he sees a figure walking with them out of the corner of his eye. Once they get to the space itself, he continues to see these figures always out of the corner of his eye. So they try to engage in a discussion with them using various tools that we've seen before, like where they ask the spirits to light up like those machines that light up, etc.
Yes.
But they don't have much luck engaging. They end the episode there saying that they definitely think that this place is haunted, specifically with ghosts that we've previously identified, like Marie and the Whistler, but also a lot of figures from the varied history that the theater has. That being said, we are here to answer the question, would you go to this place of paranormal phenomena?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I think it would be really cool to do an actual investigation there. I mean, again, with the intention of being respectful, because the history is so awful, and the person who saw things out of their periphery and didn't really get a lot of contact afterwards, it does make me think a little bit of the ghosts that we've talked about in the past who are there and just kind of want to be left alone,
right?
Maybe. So with the intent of being respectful, it would kind of be cool to be there overnight, because the ghosts that we heard about were pretty kind and benign and not super scary.
Yeah, I agree.
And I would definitely go to watch a play there today.
Yeah, I think that would be so cool. And I was trying to think, if I remember correctly, there was a movie from our childhood about a haunted theater. No, I am not thinking of Phantom of the Opera. But I swear there was one about a theater with a ton of ghosts. And it made me think of that it's just like kind of comedic almost to interact with these ghosts and try to have productions there. Like, I cannot imagine being a female performer who, if I miss my cue, I hear whistling, and if I'm trying to sing, I hear screaming.
Yes.
It must be very challenging.
Yes.
So I would love to go to this place. I think it sounds really cool, and since Lancaster is not that far from my parents, I'll have to check it out.
Yeah, for sure. No, that would be super cool. I really think the places with like theaters or movies or anything that has performers or entertainers are bound to be super interesting, because the
Right.
people that take up those jobs are really interesting.
Yeah. And clearly want to stay there, even in the afterlife.
Yes, yeah.
So that's all for the Fulton Theater. Thank you for tuning in this week's episode of Paranormal in Pennsylvania. Tune in next Thursday to see what we discuss next.